this episode of Nurturing Wellbeing, you're going to see a recording that we did at our conference. Fantastic folks that came in and sat down as we were talking about the work that's happening in communities. I had Jarred Vermillion, which we've actually done a series with him before, and we were so happy to have him back. Jarred is the Director of Wraparound Services and Fidelity at NCFIE. And I've got to tell you, I think we talk about it in the conference, what that's all about, but you'll see Jarred's passion and commitment to what we're doing with children and families in our communities. We also had a great interview with Christina Romero, who was there. In fact, we just got into a conversation. I think we forgot we were on camera, and it was just a lot of fun. She is the Executive Director of Parent Advocates for Transformation and Healing. Now, I love that. And what you're going to see is this great conversation between three of us, but you can see the work that they're doing. I think you're going to enjoy this time on Nurturing Wellbeing with Kurt Kelly. Jarred, Christina, thank you so much for being here. We've been having a great conversation. I figure we might as well go ahead and tape this and talk to me, brother. Tell me about where we are. I know we've had a couple of conversations back right after COVID. And then I think last year we did some stuff. Tell us a little bit about where you are and what the great work you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt, and thanks for having us on, and thanks for being with my friend Christina. And I think the passion for the work it continues to grow, and we continue to concretize some of what it means to create authentic partnerships with parents, especially impacted parents that come to systems needing help. So we've been expanding with Thriving Families, Safer Children. We're the co-chairs of one of the work groups. Which one?
We're a PAC parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Parent Advisory Committee. Thank you. And we've been growing in numbers. We had a great representation at the last conference. And it's funny, there's been a lot of growing implementation of impacted parents and youth coming to table, trying to create this new partnership and what it looks like. And I think compared to when I first came, I was surprised because I was coming from California, discovering that Florida was not necessarily always including their youth and families in meetings. And since in the last few years, it's still something we got to work on, but it's been great to see some evidence of growth. And even just at conferences like this, there being a space for impacted youth and families to come and be a part of the healing. So I've been doing that locally in the state and supporting the network with our group. I also continue to support the growth of the practice nationally. A lot of states and communities are finding ways to vet and change policy and create workforce development tracks for, or even partnership contracts with lived expertise organizations. So there's a lot to say. There's kind of a real quick rundown of maybe the last year.
And what's interesting is, and I've had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about how do we make systemic changes in this process? And we were actually engaging how does government do it and so forth. Really, what you've just said is don't be fearful of bringing good people to the table, even if they may not be skilled at being at the table. Bring them to the table. Let them come have a conversation, because what they have learned and what we can learn from them is valuable to the changes that we're trying to make. What is our change that, Christina, what's the ultimate goal if we were accomplishing and had all these people in there and they were getting, what's kind of the ultimate goal?
I think for me, the ultimate goal of everybody coming to the table is not only to have a voice, but really to co-create and design new ways of being, collectively. There's so much work that needs to be done, and really valuing everybody's perspective, right? We all come to the table. We all bring different things, different experiences, different lessons, different strengths that we all carry, gifts that we have. And how are we continuing to move forward and really valuing those things?
So we recognize that in society, there are folks that are challenged. They have a lot of different issues that are addressing it. And so the more we hear from people of how they can constructively deal with those issues, the more likely we have from not having the detrimental effects of having kids removed and put in child welfare system that languishes in a system of care. We do a pretty good job here in Florida of trying to get kids, when they come into care, reunited with their families better, I think better than most states. And we try to do a better job of keeping kids from staying into the system and then or getting permanency for the right thing. But sometimes what we forgot to go ask the parents that were having these problems and why it started in the first place. And I think that's next level stuff. And that's what I think you guys are talking about is how do we get it so that those kids are never removed?
Yeah. How are we creating the investment for families? Because you know what, even for me, sitting as an impacted parent, and I still look at the way the current system is running, and resources, all of these things are available for parents after they're already in the system,
Yeah.
but we really don't have anything in place for the prevention to keep them from coming into the system. I always say it in different spaces. You have resources out there. So much money goes into the resources, but they're not available when parents are calling them, right? So what are we doing, or what can be done that is different to where we normalize people seeking help beforehand and not when they become somebody in the spotlight, right?
So, and Jared, I know you moved here from California, and we're glad to have you here, brother, in this arena. But I got to tell you that some of the stuff that Florida's done with its community-based care, it was intended to get the community involved. This morning, we had a faith community committee meeting, and we were talking about just having access, getting ahead of folks. Yes, we can look at a lot of good things Florida's done, but you're right, Christina. A lot of that's after the fact. Something has happened. Your house is on fire. You call the fire department. They're going to help put it out. Wouldn't it be nice to learn how to not have the house get on fire?
Sure.
And
You
so,
do alarm checks, right? In the
yeah,
buildings,
there
right?
you
Yeah.
go. And so those are the areas that I think communities. So the strength of Florida's community-based care should naturally allow that light to shine even brighter. And yet we get off into, we have to deal with the kids that come into care. We protecting kids, and we're call it child welfare and all the system that goes along, and the funding. And then of course the legislature, because I was one of them, we come in with all of our brilliant ideas of new legislation. Yeah, all I think I like I said, the next generation, the next level stuff is what you guys are engaging in. And I think that's where the Florida Coalition for Children under Dr. Patricia Nellius and her work is where why we're engaging this. So let's talk about how we build this. How do we take it to the next level?
I just want to start, Jared, before you jump in. So even for me, there's a process that it like needs to start with, right? Um, we first need to acknowledge harm that has been caused to
Of course.
families. We have to take the time to build the relationships. And then from building the relationship and from being able to build the relationships, you're starting to gain trust, right? So we have to get to a place where we can have that trust so that we can have the conversations that bring tension. Some conversations are difficult to have, and people steer away from those conversations, but those are the conversations that need to take place in order for us to get to a place where we really start collectively making the change that we need to see.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think that you said it really well. Well, both of you did. One, systems do really good systems work, and we need societies of care that extends beyond formal systems into the community prevention. Grandmas do prevention, right? School teachers do prevention. They're all there, but they don't. The only resources they think they have is the hotline when you have a family in need. So if we look at things like trying to create an ecosystem where families, especially our Black, Brown, and Indigenous children of color, and Indian children, if there are as an ecosystem that is thriving because needs are being met, there would not be a need for significant removal because of harm or threat or danger because they're thriving in the community. My point intentionally is I think our systems as systems of care do good. Like we need you to protect children. Like we don't if that small portion that needs that we need the and you guys we need you. And for all these other families that come in because of poverty or unequal access to care, like uh, doctor's appointment, nursing care, or it's culturally unpracticed. Their healing style is not the rhetoric of the community. I think it's really about creating a thriving ecosystem outside that includes this idea. And I heard this the other day. I forget I'm stealing somebody's idea, but they were talking about a society of care, right? That looks at prevention done in prevention communities, but we have to invest in those communities. I think about, what would it look like to have grandmothers and grandfathers taking kids fishing, and that being a regular resource if it's abundant in that community. I'm teaching them, so I'm kind of running off, but the idea here is that we can only extend so far as formal systems as government, if you will, right? But the people are there. It's about inviting them into space and not ostracizing each other because we all have needs, like to protect children and to protect children.
Yeah, and I just want to add to is that that's a piece of the mindset that has to shift, right? We've have this system that is the main focus is saving children, but we're leaving out the parents. So that the mindset, the narrative needs to shift from that. Instead of only saving these children, we need to start looking at saving these parents for their children because children thrive more when they are with their families,
Well, and where do our kids go when they turn 18? And we can all answer this question probably on the count of three. They turn 18, where do they go? Who do they look for?
their
Their
families.
parents, their families, whatever they are,
They're looking for
even
that
if they've
culture.
done harm to them before, because there's a gap that just can't be filled. And I describe this as like our systems and society work is, let's pretend that I have a mother that did harm, right, to me, right? And now the system coming to protect me. They're really not, maybe not so friendly towards my mom. But the system loves me, cares about me, right? And then you wonder why I don't just thrive and do well. Well, there's this thing in universal in most of our hearts, which is if you don't love my people, I can't accept your love. And so it's really comes, and I come from a youth, right? I was not a parent involved. My children were removed, but I, as a child, was. And so, but I remember, how you treat my mom and my dad in their worst days is how you make me feel. And I think that if we can create, moving it past like just allyship, but like thinking that even if budgets as moral documents, we invest how much in foster care and adoptions and alternatives to family. And my grandmother, she had 7 children. We, all of us kids were, some way involved in one or multiple systems. And I think about how much placement dollars she saved, and like the government would have had to pay if we all went into care. My grandma protected us, but she had nothing to do that. Imagine if we invested in this grandmother to be the, call her a certified peer, whatever, to be able to be the primary resource and not have to go work for $30,000 a year at a low paying job, but now to be what the family needs and get the resource to do it.
And there's a lot of I'm not going to use the word random because they're purposeful support mechanisms. But we were talking about this earlier, how to coalesce that into. I like the idea of a society of change that really we can substitute the word society community. So we're all involved in that community. See, I actually believe this is what I served in the legislature. I served on a school board. I've come in and out of government in some of my work, but mostly I'm a businessman. I've been in the business community. It's amazing how the two worlds are so different in their thinking. There is a role for government that plays the role. Government needs to provide you the at times resources and access to have much greater resources and access that come from the community. I love getting the faith community involved. I tell churches, if you're not out there engaging in society, then what are you doing? I mean, obviously they're there to worship God and they're there to instruct the saints and they'll do all of that stuff. But the reality is they're also set to impact their community. So I like the fact, but and by the way, when you use the word faith community, that could be a very broad spectrum. But there's also a lot of folks that are doing things like I think what you guys are doing is you're now on the you're on the cutting edge of beginning to move people into how to do this, how to do it right. And I think that's the real value of the work that you're doing.
I think a lot of it had to be is relationship, right? Because it coming from like a protection system, if you will, and then coming from a protection family point of view, that getting past that conflict and authentic engagement, when there's blame, there might be shame, there's all of that, and so I think one of the coolest things we've had, and a lot of this is how is rooted in, I think, in I don't know, maybe the need for change, but both sides of the fence, if you will, professionals and impacted families and family leaders are breaking past where we would have previously called it quits and been like, you know what, you said that you offended me. I believe you stand for an ideology that is very scary in our world. And people have really kind of been putting down those like, hey, we recognize that we're taking children from out of harm's way and putting them into sometimes harm's way. And so it's like, what could we do different? How could we use the same people's skills, ideologies, and how could we use it to create this alternative? And I heard this the other day, and this is going to be kind of deep, but I may hang my hat here. But this idea that terminating parental rights, which is something that we overuse across the nation, right? It's not specific to one state. It is something that we need to protect children and families. But for the families that go through that, which my parents, like my dad went to prison, my mom went to rehab, so they never terminated my parental rights of my parents. So I still had some sort of access to them, even though I never lived with them again. But my point was, the person receiving that, it's like the death sentence, and I really think we should treat it like that. And when we treat it like that, it really causes us to say, what the heck else could we do to prevent, to support, to treat this family? My dad went to prison after killing two people in a DUI, and he served less a sentence than some parents do for neglect events that are significantly less.
You said something there. I was talking to a judge, big circuit court judge, and he'd been doing he was in the children and families arena. And he told me, this is when I first got started here at the coalition. He said, Kurt, I'm going to tell you something. He said, as a judge, you may make one in your lifetime capital case, make a decision to sentence someone to have their life terminated. Okay. So the capital offense, he says, you may do one of those. You may do two. He says, you understand the gut wrenching decisions. He said, if you care, you're going to make a gut, because you're talking about now terminating that life. He said, but right underneath that gut wrenching decision, and he says, I mean, almost emotionally, right underneath that is TPRs. He says, and you'll do 3 or 4 of those a week.
And we wonder why our system, right?
Yeah. So again, guys, I just love the fact that you have taken a different lens and it's turned on a different light that says upfront doesn't always just mean upfront doing something for children. Yes, we're going to got a whole bunch of that stuff.
Yep.
Deal with those parents that are considered the problem, but
Right.
let's talk to them in a different way that helps them move beyond this. All right, we're going to wrap up here. I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell us, where should we go and how can we help?
I would say keep moving in the direction that we are. Keep bringing people to the table. We need to do it together, right? It can't be something that it's an us against them, right? It has to be youth. It has to be parents. It has to be system professionals. It has to be done together and it has to be done differently. We need to break away from what is modernly done, what is created, what has been designed already, and we need to find new things that we need to create and work towards and design together because that's where the magic's going to happen.
Yeah. Like, how do we get a new relationship, new space with this same idea, right? Like, we can still be safe with families and create safe, thriving families, and we can also support the well-being of our community, right? And what does that really look like? I think about legal representation for families and not just low end. They should get premier. Like, you're trying to take my child away. Kurt, come try and take my.
Yeah.
Recognizing harm,
Representation.
recognizing trauma. I'm even saying back 100 years of trauma, right? And people's responses to those traumas. So what does it mean to really legally represent them? What does it mean to create thriving communities? Like, thinking about the family resource centers, but giving them to the communities, not run by right agencies, but really, what is it like to also workforce development for the people with lived expertise, and or creating contracts where they used to not. And my grandma wasn't a businesswoman, but she ran a very thriving business that took care of kids. How can she be supported to share that with other in the community? And then also just supporting the workforce development of peers. I happen to be in my, like, coming around my second decade here, I think, right? 20 years. Anyways. And so, Kurt, as you can appreciate, like, and say with me, like, you go through a lot in this stage of change, and like, being an impacted person in this space, it changes everyone, but especially changes an impacted person. And so the more that we can create these networks and leagues of folks like Christina and other lived expertise folks that can come together, I think that we just might be able to build something that could coexist in a safe place with thriving families. How about that?
You finished strong. Let me just say this. What I heard you say, Christina, you talked about what the magic is. Let me tell you what, you're the magic. You guys and what you're doing, not only driving the attention there, but then coming up with equitable solutions that are community based. It's not just government. Government has a role in this, right?
Sure.
They have a role in it.
Absolutely.
And so we want to work with legislators. We want to work with the governor's office. We want to talk to them. But we also recognize you start talking about job creation opportunities out of that.
Yeah.
How could you continue to do the work that you're doing and taking on very challenging situations and challenging children and challenging issues and still be able to live? And how can we do all of those are that's why we shouldn't be frightened to bring people to the table.
Especially in a workforce that's like struggling right now, right? Like people are leaving the field. Retention is a difficult thing. Unless you're, and so thinking about this, I think about just talking about California, I'm still connected to the work out there. And, like certified peer mental health. Um, that's creating a level of peers, like an army of peers that are coming into the workplace now that can do the work. And it doesn't take away from the professionals. We got a place for them. They're going to be advising and supporting the peers. Wait a minute. Now we have increased our coverage, right? The amount of people we've diversified, cross-trained between community and professional partnerships. So I think that we shouldn't be scared to really, people shouldn't feel like their jobs are threatened as peers come in. It creates an ability for the professionals to do more of the professional work that we need them to do, that they do so well. So that's where I'm going to leave it.
They also can have they're partnering,
Correct.
they're coexisting with at levels. And then that's why we even talk about the faith community. We were talking about Care Portal this morning, some things like it. I heard a statistic that once somebody asks for Care Portal, and remember it comes from a church need and they give that. Once they get that, they usually never ask for it again. It's not that they don't have a need. They've got a community all of a sudden surrounding them.
I
It's
heard
the
a story
connection there. They
yesterday.
get linked to that community, and we no longer need Care Portal. Now we know that we have a network of people right where we are that can support and help.
That is genuinely concerned about me. It's not a handout. It's just, and all of a sudden oh my goodness, you mean we've done what America's supposed to be anyhow, and that's
Sure.
loving one another and caring for. That's why the great work that you do. I know you're about ready to say, you have a final statement.
I'll just say thanks for having us on. And I think that the conversation is really, and all of this is about relationship and getting closer to the people that we want to serve, right? And so thank you for letting us come on.
And
And
growing the movement.
yeah, and we'll see you maybe again next year. We hopefully will have maybe
Let's
some
take
new
it to the next
parents.
level
Take
next
it to
year.
the
And by
next
the way,
level.
as we start hearing the successes, and I know I talked to Tricia about this, we got to tell your story, man. The more we have successes, we got to tell it. I got to
Yeah.
tell it to people who understand it, legislators and church leaders and community leaders and mayors and so
Yeah.
forth. We just got to keep telling the story. You guys, I
Keep
love
getting
you.
out there.
Appreciate you being on the program today. But more importantly, I appreciate the work and the calling that you have on your life to do this. And with that, God bless you.
Thank you so much.